Alan McNish with Henri Pescarolo, and Pesca entered the race 33 times as a driver, and that still is a record. And in fact, it wasn't an uninterrupted run, 33 times in 34 years. 1 year he couldn't enter the race because he was still recovering from the burns that he still carries the scars of that happened in a Formula One crash. And that race he's talking about, he was in the Matra racing against the GT40s, and he brought the car back in after a night where at some stages it was down to walking pace. The rain was so torrential. Back up into second place, and in fact they ended up finishing a very close second to the GT40. And similar story 50 years ago when the Porsche of Richard Atwood and Hans Hermann won at Le Mans, the first outright win for Porsche. They were the fifth of 5 factory 917s entered. Richard Atwood was asked by the factory what car would he like. He went for the 3.7 litre, not the 3.9 litre engine, because it was better tried and tested and a bit less stressed. He went for a Kurtek, the short tail car, because he didn't feel comfortable in the long tail. And that was not something that you should have got the best of out of Le Mans. And they asked, who would you like as a co-driver? And he wanted Hans Hermann. Now, Hermann had finished second the year before with Jackie Ickx, but that wasn't part of it. Hermann was the oldest and most experienced driver in the team, and that's why Atwood chose him. And they were the first of just 7 cars that finished that race 50 years ago. 1970 Le Mans 24 hours out of 51 starters. That's how wretched the weather was. And again, as Henri Pescarolo said, just a few years ago we started the race behind the safety car because the weather was so bad for racing, and had 2 hours of safety car running. Now, what the weather throws at us, nobody knows in the real world or in the sim world. Of course, one rule that we know from the film Le Mans from Steve McQueen is that it always races at Le Mans, and most years it always rains at Le Mans. Most years it does. Some years it really rains. Some years you just get a sprinkle. Who knows what the game has got in store? But we don't need the weather to jazz up this race. We've got a very exciting race on our hands. Watching Niki Thiem again in the Aston Martin as he battles for position here in the GTE class.
Well, what we definitely do know that it's going to get dark, and when it does get dark, it is pretty dark out there. I actually had a little run on the safety car yesterday evening, and the sun coming down into Indianapolis is right into your eyes as you're trying to roll the car into the right-hander, and it's exactly as it is. You know, what it would normally be in June, what they're going to have to go through when it gets to September. And so in that respect, I think that part of the night is going to be quite interesting, especially the dynamic of different people in different parts of the world. When everybody's in Le Mans, then they have to get used to that sort of change in their biorhythms. But if you've got, for example, Brendan Hartley in New Zealand, or the guys that are in California, Jenson Button, for example, then maybe they're a little bit more adaptable to it.
Yeah, it could throw you off a bit. And I was actually chatting to Jimmy Broadbent earlier in the week, and he was saying to me, he's in the GTE class, and he said this race is going to be won or lost during the night time because it can be very difficult to see the LMP2 cars coming up towards you. And he was saying it's going to be all about just avoiding the LMP2 cars throughout the night, and that could be very critical, particularly in the GTE class. Likewise, the LMP2 class, you could have drivers start to take silly risks in trying to get past those GT cars if they're being caught, or if perhaps they feel that they can make up more time. So it's going to be a critical part of the race, Ben.
Yeah, back with you for the next couple of hours as Martin takes a well-earned rest as we settle in now into the 24 hours of Le Mans Virtual. And the first couple of hours always has this frenetic pace to it, and at some point you take a breath and everything settles in. The issue we have here, Chris, is we're seeing now the faster drivers getting into the cars, and a big tank slapper from our Malaysian car. He does make contact with the barrier. And who was in the car at the time? That's the car shared by Alex and Alistair Young in Malaysia. Alex Young was previously Formula One driver for Minardi, and his son is only about 16, 17 years old, I think, Alan.
Yes, he is. He's been obviously brought up in and around motor racing, and he's cut his teeth a little bit in karting, and now clearly is getting used to what it's like in the virtual world here. But that was quite a big off for the car, just down into Indianapolis on the right-hand side. The right-hander lost it and then went in backwards on the left. A lot of damage, so that'll be back to the pits and in to the box for quite a long time for the repairs to that one. The Malaysian, it's an all-Malaysian crewed car as well, and so they're sitting in Kuala Lumpur.
And officially, that's the sim racer Mohamed Naquib.
Yes, you got Mohamed in that car as well. He actually recently raced in the Porsche Community Legends and the E-Racing GP Southeast Asia as well.
I should know that.
Yeah.
I commentated on it.
Oh, did
it's
you?
Embarrassing. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, he wasn't that high up the field.
No, obviously you weren't concentrating.
Or that, yeah. Absolutely. Just to let you know, if you are following our live timing, Chris mentioned a few moments ago regarding pit stops. Mathematically, it's impossible to have not done 3 stops.
Yes.
So we've got a few issues with the live timing, maybe not registering Atzi Kirchhoff's third pit stop, but everyone will have done 3 pit stops by now, at least 3 pit stops in the LMP category.
I've got to say, it's, you know, doing the 24-hour of Le Mans is obviously my first experience of it. It's hard to know where to look, because once you get stuck into the timing screen, then you look back to the visuals and you've got a big off that's happened, and it's so hard to keep up with the race. But at the same time, it's just fantastic to see all these drivers out there. Now we're starting to see the sim drivers come in as well. And I've got to say, the professionals so far have done a really good job at matching their pace. We were expecting a big difference between the sim and the professional drivers, and that might happen later on, but it's been a fantastic so far just to see all the guys out there.
Bit of drafting going on there. You heard a little bit of a lift sitting into the slipstream. Was that to try and gain a little bit of fuel efficiency in that one? Because he was in a position where he could have easily, I think, gone past, but decided to lift and then just sit in the slipstream of the Corvette up ahead. Yeah,
and this is the battle for the lead of the race. So Tommy Usgaard in the Porsche eSports team, the 93 car, and he is following Erhan Yuyovsky in Romain Grosjean's Corvette, and clearly down the straight the Porsche has a lot more speed. Obviously it's gaining a little bit thanks to the slipstream, but clearly it looks like a stronger car. But Usgaard is happy to be sitting there and lifting off twice, I think, before the first chicane. Yeah, and he's 8 seconds ahead of third place car, which is a Dempsey Proton number 88. And so in that respect, he is in a position where, you know, with the time to go, it's a case of just pacing himself. But I'm pretty sure if he did overtake, he could pull away by the looks of what he had there on the straight. Erhan Yuyovsky, one of the best sim racers out there at the moment, Chris.
Yeah, Yuyovsky is, you've got to say, he's probably in the top 10 of sim drivers at the moment, and that R8G team is incredibly quick. They've got 2 very, very good sim drivers in that car.
And you can see there on the right-hand side, Tommy Usgaard as part of the Works Porsche team, concentrating hard right now. And this is the closest battle on circuit, the lead battle for GTE. 20 GTE cars with us, and still a couple of our drivers from the real world. We've got Nicky Thiem up there in 5th position, although Thiem has a lot of sim racing experience, but it does look like the majority of them have now gone to their sim drivers for this next chunk of race.
Yeah, one thing going back to the lead team there, the R8G eSports team, is Erhan and Risto. This has happened with a few cars. They've been teammates. They've raced together several times, and they've won together as teammates as well. And in the All-Star Series, you would know Erhan's name because he's had wins in that as well. So he's become a bit of a household name amongst viewers in the sim racing world. So they've also won the VEC Championship together as teammates of Erhan and Risto.
And with Daniel Juncadella and Matthias Besch getting into that car. Romain Grosjean, pretty new to the sim racing world. He himself doesn't do that much, but interesting that he's got himself involved with a team, Alan.
Yes, it is, but you know, there's quite a few drivers that have sort of evolved into that way as well. At the end of the day, it's competition, and competition is something that we love. We can't get away from it. Once it's in your veins, however it gets into your veins, then it's in there. And you know, Romain obviously has done a lot of simulator work for his Formula One career, but that's been on a very different purpose. That's to develop a racing car. This is actually to race. And so in that respect, then it does take a little bit of getting used to the wheel-to-wheel aspects to it. But I think ultimately, if you're a good driver, you're a good driver, and so you should be able to develop. But for Romain, he's obviously decided to take a few hired guns on his side as well by getting a team, so that all the stuff doesn't sit on his shoulders.
And I guess also it's kind of what you can prioritise at home. I know that he's got a couple of young kids and a wife in Geneva, and therefore perhaps having that at home, you need to have the flexibility of your home environment to allow you to put in the amount of hours that these guys have had to put in to get themselves up to pace.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, the amount of hours that any driver has to put in to get themselves up to pace in their career is a heck of a lot, whether it's online or on track. And so in that respect, I think partners are very accommodating wherever they are all around the world, including our partners, I've got to say, who allowed us to be here.
Absolutely, well said, and I'm sure Kelly's listening, so brownie points for you.
But I must say, a lot of people are listening. I've had a couple of messages. One came in from John Doonan, who's the boss of IMSA in the United States of America, who's tuned in and said, this is fantastic. Danny Sullivan, the Indy 500 winner, and also has raced at Le Mans. Danny has just woken up in California and said big thumbs up on it. So it's fantastic how people around the world are actually tuning into it. Yeah,
the team that I worked with on the Dakar at the start of the year over in South Africa, shout out to you guys. Thank you very much for all your support and messages. Amazing to have. And I guess that is exactly what these guys want to do, to give sim racing to the largest possible audience, and I don't think we've seen anybody else really manage in the way that we have today.
Yeah, but even people back at home that would normally have been in Le Mans this weekend, you know, whether it be camping, whether it be as guests of a team or whatever else, they are all sort of in a position where they're not able to do it. And one of them actually normally has their birthday this weekend, a lady called Katie Osborne. Big shout out, happy birthday. And so you can virtually have your birthday with us here this weekend, but in September maybe we can have a little extra celebration.
Absolutely. Watching then the 92 Porsche of Matt Backham, sitting in third position, chasing down that lead battle that we saw, as you say, 9 seconds, and he's actually just passed the Dempsey Proton Porsche, so now Porsche works teams second and third. And actually, it was a good battle because they had Nicky Tim right in there as well. That was quite close. You can see it on screen here. There is Tim in the first of the Aston Martins right behind Franco Senci. And is he one of our pro drivers? I think he is. No, he's a sim driver, Michele, the Italian. And so battling with Nicky Tim and Matt Backham. Matt Backham, a very, very well-known Coanda driver. Coanda, though, normally really focusing on a different platform, on the iRacing platform. So interesting to have them here. And another man who has actually won in the iRacing IMSA series, Nick Tandy, has won for Porsche, and he's been racing for Porsche here at Le Mans. Just waiting to hear from Nick. As usual, connectivity issues, always a little bit, but I think Haley now has Nick. Yes, he does.
Yeah. Hello, Nick. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Nick. Fantastic. So you're driving for the 93 Porsche eSports team. You're currently second. Tommy's currently driving. So just tell us about, you started for the team. How was it? Because right now you're not actually, obviously, at Le Mans. You're at home in Bedfordshire, if I'm not mistaken.
I am, yes. No, it was a good start to the race. These online races, they're quite stressful for a lot of probably a lot of real world drivers, because we're out of our comfort zone. So yeah, there was a big lead up to the race, like a typical Le Mans, you know, the build up to a Le Mans 24-hour, and yeah, the nerves started building. Luckily, we were on the front row, thanks to my teammates in qualifying. Which takes a bit of the stress out of the start, but yeah, it's a case of, you know, a long race. The only thing that you can do in the first hour, the first couple of hours, is lose the race. So we had a good start. We're pleased with how the car's running. Obviously, Tommy's out now. I think he's probably trying to stay on the heels of the Chevy. Probably trying to save a bit of fuel, see if we can manage to stretch maybe possibly another lap for the next stop. But yeah, it's looking good. I enjoyed the first couple of stints. I'm looking forward to getting back in.
So can you just tell us a bit about the preparation and how the kind of exchange of information, if you like, happened between you and your fellow sim racing teammates?
Yeah, so there's been a big build-up. The Porsche Esports team have put a lot of effort in, as I'm sure a lot of the teams have. And we've been working together. I mean, there's 16 drivers within our team, and that's just the drivers. If you look at the amount of people behind the scenes working as well, you know, we've done this properly. We've put the preparation in. We've got the right people behind us that know A, how to go racing at Le Mans, but also B, how to go sim racing successfully. So yeah, there's a lot of people that have put a lot of effort in, and yeah, it's been hard work, but it's, you know, it's good because it's given us something to do. It's given us some competition to get our teeth stuck into, and you know, it's the whole aim, of course, is the end result. So if we get a result come the end of the race tomorrow afternoon, then it'll all be worth it.
Well, that hard work seems to be paying off. Thanks a lot, Nick, and we'll be seeing you out there in a bit. Thank you.
You will do. Cheers.
And Nick, actually, when he does his sim racing over on the iRacing platform, a lot of the time he likes to do oval racing, because, of course, he came from short track oval racing in the UK before he kind of committed to a career with Porsche. So he continues to get his fix by doing short track and long track oval races on iRacing. He's got a fantastic rating on ovals. It's actually better than his road course rating on iRacing.
A little bit different though, isn't it? But I think Nick Tandy is one of those guys, I'm sure you'll agree, he's quick in anything. You know, Nick's had such a successful career, particularly around Le Mans, and he's one of those guys that can just jump in anything and go fast.
So here is the classification then, with Toyota Gazoo Racing at the head of the field thanks to a fantastic stint from Pachito Lopez. He is ahead of Oliver Rowland, then Mark Gassner in the Rebellion Williams Esports. Toyota Gazoo Racing Argentina sitting in 4th position, but we are kind of about to get some pit stops, so these are slightly skewed results right now. As you can see, both the Jota Team Redline cars in the pits, Jenson Button's team's in the pits in 15th, and Veloce Esports 3 also in pit lane. We're going to see some more star names as those cars come back out onto circuit. And then the first of the GTE cars is the Romain Grosjean team, just ahead, and only just ahead of Nick Tandy's Works Porsche. Then his teammate Matt Backham sitting there in 3rd spot, and then Dempsey Proton, kind of private entry, if you like, sitting just behind them with the first of the Aston Martins, the 95 in 5th spot. The first of the Ferraris is the 51 car in 7th position. Ferrari really not showing at all right now, Chris.
Well, we've got to remember they've only had a week to a week and a half to prepare for this, with that car coming late into R Factor 2. It was just brought in because of this event. Ferrari were ready to enter, so we needed to get the car in, and they haven't had a lot of time to go and test it. The other cars, the drivers have done full championships in them, so they are very much aware of how the car will perform in these races. They've had competitive races in their cars, but Ferrari, that hasn't been the case. And just like in the real world, imagine you were given a Ferrari a week and a half before Le Mans, and you said, right, go ahead and try and go and get a result with that. It's going to be very difficult, but I think a problem here coming into pit lane for the 37.
Oh, dearie me. So the 37
Jota,
car, yeah, that's a Jota car.
There we go. And there's contact in pit lane as well, so there'll be damage there to the rear of the car. As you may have just seen, there was a slight damage.
So that was Dominic Farber who was in the car. Pachito, the leader of the race, is also in pit lane, and the car behind, is that the Jenson Button car? No, it's not. It's
That's the Bicolis car,
yeah,
I believe, of Jurnej Simoncic has just come in, having just set the fastest, no, that was Dalatraz, I think. No, it was Simoncic who set the fastest 3rd sector of the race.
Just a quick question for you. Seeing them in the pit lane there, normally in Le Mans, you have to line up parallel. You can't come in at an angle. Is that something that strategically they're doing so that they get a clear run out of the pit lane? So they don't have to turn the steering wheel, they just accelerate and off they go.
We've seen it in races around this circuit, drivers getting stuck in the pit lane because they just simply can't get out. You know, there's not a crew that can flip your car around and say, right, off you go. That's why the drivers, they haven't been advised to do so, but the sim drivers would have been advised, and the professional drivers, to come in at an angle. So even if there's a car in front of you that hasn't done the same, you can go straight out.
Yep.
So Pachito Lopez looked as though he was taking his gloves off. He's done a fantastic stint to get the Toyota up to what was pretty much, it wasn't the lead of the race, but pretty close to the lead of the race virtually after all the pit stops shook out. Interesting to see who goes into that car. He shares it with Kamui Kobayashi and Mike Conway. Conway has very little, if no, experience in sim racing whatsoever. They do have Maxime Brent, though, who is racing, the only driver to actually have his sim located in Le Mans. He's an engineer for Toyota. He's also an avid sim racer, and he is in Le Mans himself.
Yeah, he has a lot of experience as well. He's appeared in stuff like the VLN, the 12-hour Sebring, 1,000 miles of Interlagos, where he finished second, 24 hours of Nürburgring, where he finished fifth, and the 24-hour of Daytona, where he finished seventh. Now, that's all sim races, and he did that all this year. So he's had a lot of experience, but he's having to carry a whole team, as you said. Pachito has sim racing experience, but Kamui and Mike do not. So they're going to be on the back foot there, but I'm sure Maxime would have been working very hard with them to try and get him up to speed as quickly as possible. Well,
he's their engineer anyway, so he's allowed to tell them what to do, whether it be in the sim world.
He can be as honest as he likes.
Yeah, but there's quite a few actual real-world engineers that are participating in this race, and they're not just there spectating, they're actually participating in it. And just had a few sort of messages in about different aspects to what they're having to deal with going forward. So I think they're learning as well, and engineers learn very, very quickly.
I was going to ask, Alan, actually, how would it feel if you were racing with your engineer and then they went out and beat you? How would that feel next time you go to the track?
Well, I always wanted to do one thing, where I wanted to engineer the car and they drove. Because there's a few times when I said, the car's oversteering, it's doing everything I don't want it to do. And they say, get in and drive it. It's all right, you should be able to go with it. To roll reverse. In this situation, you certainly can roll reverse. But so, yeah, I've had a few quick engineers in my time, I'm sure of that.
Now, please do use the hashtag Le Mans 24 Virtual if you want to ask us any questions. I know that there'll be 1,000,001 questions out there throughout the world, as this is a brand new experience for mostly all of us. I've done a little bit of commentary on virtual racing before, and of course, Chris is our expert, so we'll throw a lot of questions your way, Chris. But as we're seeing pit stops right now, tell us physically, how does it actually work between the drivers?
What was that? Sorry, that's
pit stops.
Pit stops.
Yeah.
Yes. So once they have come into the pit lane, the other driver will then jump into the server and take their place, and they'll go back out onto the pits.
So does the driver have to request to take over the car? How does that kind of system work?
It's something they'll... Oh, there we go. That's contact there. Just trying to pick out who that is.
It was one of the TDS cars, and it got a hit up the back. Yes. Rebellion straight into the back. He didn't hit it on the quarter. Usually if they hit it onto that rear tyre, it can cause a puncture. But it looks like it was a bit of bodywork in that respect. Sorry.
Yeah, so pit stops, in terms of how they exactly work, come into the pits, you have to request a new driver to be allocated to the car by the actual driver themselves?
It's something that I believe that they have all planned already for the race, so who's getting in and exactly what time. Again, they all have to do a certain amount of hours. They have to do a minimum of 4, maximum of 7. So it's something that they will have planned. So the next driver, you know, they're not going to be in bed when the other drivers come in, and now it's trying to tell them, are you going to take over this car or what? So it's something that they would have exactly planned, so the other driver is ready to jump in.
Very, very interesting strategy from our leading 2 GTE cars here. Riding on board on the right-hand side with Tommy Usgaard in the top, and then the Corvette below of Yujovski, all the way from Macedonia. So many different countries involved in this that perhaps you wouldn't necessarily see in real-world racing. It does seem as though the likes of Slovakia and Slovenia, Macedonia, places like that are way more adopted to sim racing much quicker than they have real-world.
Yeah, they have. You know, I think to some extent, if you don't necessarily have the other options, then you grab onto what you've got and you take a big leap forward. It's a fantastic opportunity for these countries that maybe don't have the same traditions as others to sort of steal a march. And these two are going at it, though, because they've been hammer and tong all the way since the beginning of the stint, since they both got in, which is now 7-8 laps old. And they're trading within a tenth of a second of each other all the time. However, I still think the Porsche sitting there in the slipstream, using that slipstream effect to very, very good advantage. Fuel saving, and I don't know exactly how much time he'll be gaining from that, or fuel effect, but it's got to be significant for him just to want to sit behind.
Yeah, of course, you know, he can go longer in the strategy, and we know the Corvette is very good on fuel saving. It went 15 laps right at the start of the race, so the last thing you want to do is give that Corvette even more of an advantage and let it drop behind you. So this is good stuff from the Porsche, just to lift and coast coming into those Mulsanne chicanes, and that'll help them go a little bit longer.
And how about the body language of those two drivers, Alan? Yuyovsky does look a little bit flustered in the way that he's moving around quite a lot in his seat, although he's actually not, surprisingly, got a race seat by the looks of things.
Yeah, but he's maybe looking flustered, but looking at his average lap times, he's not flustered by making mistakes and things. He's clearly having to work. You see the quick reactions on the wheel, and so in that respect, he's having to work, and he's always checking his mirrors. The very interesting thing for me with this particular camera shot is now you've got, for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, to watch their eyes. Look where their eyes are and how they're darting around, because they're trying to get the visual, the overview all around you of what's going on, where the car is behind, what you need to do, as well as spotting the apex, looking as far ahead as possible. The trickier part is for the driver behind, because he's looking at the gearbox of the other car, and he's got a slightly restricted view. But that was a perfect example there of how much detail the driver information resources are taking in, and it's just doing it naturally. He's not thinking about it, it's all just second nature.
New fastest lap of the race for Atsi Kirchhoff in the Team Redline machine. This is my favourite for victory, with Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. Max was never able to run at the front of the field in those early stints, but Kirchhoff, after those pit stops, has now got himself at the head of the field, ahead of the Veloce Esports 2 car. And the gap now 6.1 seconds, but a great middle sector from Kirchhoff to get himself and stretch that advantage. And it's a good advantage too, because you look back to third position, Kobayashi has taken over from Pachito Lopez. It's half a minute back to him already.
Yeah, you're probably wondering what has Atsi Kirchhoff done in terms of experience, and to give the guys back at home an insight into that. Atsi Kirchhoff, he's been a vice world champion on other platforms, and he's had world championship wins across other platforms. And what I mean by that, not on Project Cars 2, but on other platforms of sim racing. And he was a 2012 Pro Series champion as well. So he's been at the very, very top of the game, and he's been a vice world champion as well, with also world championship wins. So Atsi Kirchhoff is definitely one of the best out there.
And he's also a kind of a founding member of the Team Redline institution that has sort of appeared in sim racing over the last 20 years.
And Gregor Hutu, he's been at the top of sim racing for 20 years. So for him, this must be a brilliant moment to see his Team Redline here in the biggest esports race there's ever been after 20 years of racing.
Looking a little bit further down the grid, one of the cars that actually had a problem earlier on is the Van der Linde WRT car that was leading and then had an issue and has dropped back. Looking at the average lap times, the driver in that car now is absolutely flying. Cornelis has really got the foot down and is trying to grab back in all the sort of lost time they had at the beginning.
Kirchhoff leads from Podoreski, and Kobayashi, a real-world driver, sitting in third position. But I expect that to change. Here it is, look. Devlin Braun just behind, and only just behind. Kobayashi, as we said before, with limited experience, and Devlin Braun is incredibly fast. And I think that 2C's Motorsport car is going to go up into third spot.
Yeah, Devlin Braun, a very quick driver indeed, and the 2C have a really good team overall. Oliver Rowland has been very fast recently in the Isolation E-Racing Series and the Formula E Race at Home Challenge as well. And Braun, likewise, a really quick esports driver. He can see looking left as he goes down towards the Porsche curves, and a brilliant move coming up here from Braun. In fact, is that into Indianapolis it is, and takes the place.
Funny old line from Kobayashi, though, right on the inside line there. He only managed to get through that corner, I think, because he massively backed out of it. But he would do well just to sit behind Braun if he can and follow and understand exactly how these guys are quick. Because
I think that's the hard part, though.
Well,
He's sit behind it because he's coming up to the Porsche curves, the place where you could lose 3 seconds straight away just by having trying to get a feel for it.
Well, I was going to say, Devon, he's coming off the back of racing for 24 hours last week, so he's got a good experience of this, and he was second in that race as well with his teammate Rory Rinning, and that was in the LMP2 class. They're part of the Singularity team, who have a lot of drivers throughout this field. Singularity are a very established team run by Dennis Lind, and they've got drivers all around in different classes, and Rory and Devon, one of the best of those with that first and second last week.
Just looking at Kobayashi there coming through the Porsche cars, the front of that car is very reactional. You can see there he's making some quite very quick adjustments to the steering wheel, but the nose is diving into the corner, and that, I know from bitter experience in a racing car, just takes you back, loses your confidence, and after that you're actually reacting to the car as opposed to telling the car what to do.
It's going to be the heavy tank of fuel. The front end is going to be very slow and unresponsive at times. Some people say it's easier to drive at that stage when you're on a heavy tank of fuel, and others say, you know, when you get into that, when you get to a car that has a low tank of fuel, then it can be a little bit harder to drive. But there we can see Kamui just in the rig at the moment. Pretty nice setup they got there as well, I'd have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. From Tokyo in Japan, looks like he's got another driver alongside him, and perhaps, like some of the drivers, actually performing in different TV studios around the world. Lasse Sorensen in Denmark is racing from a TV studio. We've got other presentations at Sky Sports in Italy. They're presenting from the Esports Palace in Bergamo, and fantastic to see how TV channels have adopted and put a lot of effort into this, and it's kind of cool, isn't it, to be able to present your racing series and have a driver in the studio with you being part of it.
Yeah, and it keeps them close to you and means that you can respond to those problems very quickly should you arise any. So I'd say it can put you almost at an advantage having that team around you. So, but this battle continues for the lead in GTE. Really good, and no surprise to see Usgaard just staying behind Yuyovsky at the moment.
So Brawn now 30 seconds back in third position for 2Cs Motorsport. Kobayashi dropping down to fourth. The next person chasing Kobayashi down will be Mark Gassner, a last-minute addition to the Rebellion Williams eSports team, the 13 car, and he is approximately 10 seconds back from Kobayashi. So we'll see that change in a few moments. And actually, Gassner's got Toyota Racing Argentina in residency as well, just a couple of tenths between the two of those. So battles wherever you look around the circuit, as you would expect from the Le Mans 24 Hours Virtuelle. I mean, it says a battle, Alan, for the lead of the GTE, but it's not really a battle because they just kind of follow a leader at the moment.
Yeah, follow the leader, but it's a strategic battle. This isn't a battle for position right now. They're looking at the bigger picture longer term, and so it's a strategic battle, certainly in the case of the Porsche, that's just sort of hanging on there, waiting, and it's kind of like, you know, a tiger ready to pounce. You just don't know when it's going to happen, but it will happen at some point.
At the moment, just the single retiree out of the race. Everybody else is still running, and unfortunately, if you do run out of fuel on the circuit, then you cannot get yourself back to the pits, and that is why the FARB All-in Sports car is no longer with us. Fernando Alonso sadly running out of fuel on track.
It's happened before. I've seen it happen before. 2003 it happened where missed the pit entry, and Frank Bieler ran out of fuel on the circuit and tried to come back on the starter motor, and it's all gone. And it can be a split second of a car maybe being in your way where you can't come into the pit lane. But you know, you've got all the numbers. You know the numbers are sitting there in front of you, and so in reality, should be in the pits if you're down to a litre.
Yeah, and it did sound like there was a few issues with Fernando's car getting into pit lane, and so I think he was advised to go out of pit lane, do a lap and come back in to see if he could actually get into the pit box, because he wasn't able to get into the pit box. And sadly, it seems to be that they haven't managed to get back to pits. So a big shame to see one of our leading and big names having to retire out of the race, but those things happen in the real world. Little mistakes happen at the Le Mans 24 Hours, and unfortunately a little mistake here for Fernando as well, and that's life.
Yep, unfortunately a very costly mistake though. You know, there have been mistakes made out there where people are still in the race, but unfortunately that is a mistake you really do not want to make in the Le Mans 24 Hour. And it's a real shame because they put a lot of hard work into preparing for this at the FARB team. And it's a real shame to see Alonso out of the race. It was a team that a lot of people were excited to see how they were going to get on, given the recent form of Alonso in esports as well. He was coming into this as a hot prospect, and one mistake and 9 laps into a 24-hour race, he's out.
So Nicky Thiem has managed to get himself up into 4th place in the Aston Martin, now ahead of the Dempsey Proton Porsche. So that's a change for 4th in class in GTE. But the lead battle still very, very close. Here is Kobayashi now, as we mentioned a few moments ago, with Mark Gassner just behind. Gassner is a real-world driver as well as a virtual driver. He actually won one of the GT Academy competitions, that PlayStation Academy, with Gran Turismo as kind of the training platform, and then getting a great chance to have a real kind of comprehensive course in real-world driving before they were then tested. It wasn't a competition where they took loads of drivers, threw them into a car and then said, let's see how you can sink or swim. There was a whole week's course of tuition to get those guys up to a point where they could then go into the real-world sport.
I mean, it was a fantastic program. We had the likes of Lucas Ordonez come out of that as well. As we'll come back to that in a second, because there's a really close battle going on here, Ben.
Well, this is now Porsche ahead of Corvette. So Tommy Usgaard has decided to go ahead. Let's see how it happened. Kept his foot in this time rather than backing out and saving fuel, Alan. He's obviously got to a number that he's happy with, and all of a sudden he can now unleash the power and the speed of that Porsche.
Yeah, there's also another thing. Bakum, his teammate, is catching up behind as well, so it was going to be a 3-car battle if he hadn't have sort of slipped past. And now the big question is, can the Corvette actually stay with the Porsche there? Can he hang on? Because we've always said for the last, what, 7 or 8 laps, once he gets past, he'll pull away. And now we'll see the true pace of the Porsche. Otherwise, why would he have overtaken? There was no logical reason.
I want to remind our viewers at home that they may be alone physically, but they are not alone out there in this race, because they're going to have the engineers in their ear. The engineers are going to be running the numbers from Porsche, who have done this race several times and been successful at it as well. And that would have been a instruction there to Usgaard to say, go past, get in the lead, get your foot down, and let's get a gap.
Yeah, there's another point as well, that coming into the pit lane, because if they're coming in on the same lap together, depends where you are in your pit box. You can ideally be in a position where you can help yourself but block the other car. If the pit boxes are close enough. I'm not sure where they are in the pit lane together, but that's just another factor that would come into the assumptions if you were in a position where the 2 cars were close.
Well, we saw earlier LMP2 car coming in, wasn't it? And the car ahead made a mistake, spun into the path, and there was contact there, and you had damage coming in. Not only that, but it slowed you up, slowed that team up as well. So that's a very small thing to look into, and perhaps looking into it too much there, but it's definitely something that would be on the minds of the engineers.
Yeah, that was Simoncic who got the pole position, and Simoncic headed off into pit lane to change driver, and he's handed over to Esteban Guerri, the Argentine World Touring Car driver, who has been incredibly fast in front-wheel drive World Touring cars. Not a huge amount of other experience, but has progressed hugely in the COVID month or two of sim racing, and he actually went out and did the fastest first sector of anybody in LMP. So sits in 9th position, the Baikonur car right now, after issues earlier on. 1 minute down off Atsi Kirchhoff, our leader, but we are so early into this race, anything can still happen. Corvette sitting in the slipstream now of Porsche. For the moment, Tommy Usgaard is not getting away from Yuyovsky. They were the same time through the first sector of the lap.
Yeah, it's going to be very hard to break the toe. The toe still does work in R-Factor 2. It's not as effective as it might be in real life. Some people may argue that that is the case, but that's what it's all about. It's hard to break the toe at the Mulsanne, so it's going to be when they come out of Mulsanne now and when they approach Indianapolis. That's going to be where Usgaard is going to have to try and get a gap. So next time they come out of the 4 chicanes, he's got a big enough gap to not worry about Yuyovsky in the toe behind.
But they do sometimes have to watch their mirrors with LMP2 cars slicing through.
That would have helped as well, but as we say that, Usgaard runs wide, and this might be a change of lead then.
Usgaard just getting a little bit deep into Mulsanne, perhaps getting a little bit distracted by the LMP2 car, and here comes the big Corvette, rumbling its way into the slipstream. Listen to the throttle. Does he back out of it, or does he try and get back past? no real space through the kink there on the way to Indianapolis. And now you then have to start being really brave on the brakes to get through, and the advantage and the momentum now will be lost, and he'll just have to try for another time. But there's so many possibilities with traffic always being an issue at Le Mans for those little errors to creep in. But great job that Yoyoski's doing right now, knowing that they both have to change drivers, they'll both have to hand over to different experiences of drivers. And credit to Romain Grosjean's team doing a fantastic job of disturbing the dominance of Porsche so far.
Yeah, they're doing a fantastic job. This was a team that personally I had my eye on coming into this, because the driver lineup is so strong. Yoyoski and Risto Capé, they have raced as teammates, they've been successful as teammates, and Danny Juncadella has been successful in the Isolation E-Racing Series. He was the vice champion in that, wrapped that vice champion title up just earlier this week. So Matthias Besch, of course, he's a former World Endurance champion, so he's got good experience, and together as a team, that is a very strong driver lineup across the board.
Into the Ford chicane, flicking left, flicking right. They can run a huge amount more curb through there than you would do in the real world. If you did that in the real world, you'd break your back and probably break the car too. So some of the real world drivers would be quite surprised at how much curb and how abusive you can be to your car, because they just wouldn't do it. And it's, again, that adaptation of real into virtual.
Well, it's like saying to someone, you know, when you're going around that corner in your car, hit that curb or hit that bit of pavement, and you'll go quicker around there and you won't feel a thing. It's like saying that to someone. So the drivers just have that intuition to not take that bit of curb, because, as you said, it's gonna cause damage, or it's gonna, you know, injure them, or they're going to feel it and it's going to send them into a spin perhaps. So to try and get that out of their heads has taken them a while, I'm sure, but once they have got around that, they have found out that you know, sim racing, in sim racing, drivers will do anything they can just to gain that extra 10th or 100th, and over in the likes of Gregor, who to 20 years of racing, he has really picked up where you can gain small little advantages around here, and part of that is taking a lot of curb through the Ford chicanes, and we've seen gradually the professional drivers have adapted to that and have started to do that.
So the Dempsey Proton 88 Porsche has now pitted, as you can see on the timing screen, so that's why he's tumbling down. I think we're about to see all of the GT cars pit. It'll be interesting to see how long this Porsche can go. Our leader definitely was saving fuel through most of this stint. Now he's put himself ahead of the Corvette, is unable to do the same thing as what he was doing, but we're going to see some pit stops in a few moments' time. Good battle going on track, but let's now turn to some Le Mans legends. Jackie Ickx and Derek Bell with another Le Mans legend, Alan McNish.
Was 11. That's how many victories these two teammates have at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Jackie Ickx, Derek Bell, fantastic to see you guys. Jackie, you're looking extremely well. How are you enjoying the race?
Well, it's good to see you too, Alan, because I think you have a number of podiums as well. I don't know if we have speak about it.
Yeah, I've got a few, but you know, we're always chasing yourself and Derek. That was for sure. That was for sure. But how is things for you? Are you enjoying this simulated race?
Well, I think yes. I must say that I'm totally amazed. I think it looks fantastic. It's unbelievable what the technology can do. It's incredible to see that the competitors are in Tokyo, Buenos Aires, New York, and everywhere around the world. And I think the initiative of the SEO to organize for the very first time a virtual 24 hours to celebrate that legendary race from the who is almost 100 years old now, to celebrate all those who have done it before, those who do it today. And in common, definitely, we have the passion for the same sport, which is automobile racing.
Derek, you know, are you in the USA watching this? Did you just wake up and start it, or have you seen the start of this race?
I've been watching it for far too long, really. You know, I was up early this morning and I picked up the first hour of it as well, bits of it. So yeah, I've seen quite a lot of it, but it's a very hot day here. It's like 90 degrees. So I'm actually sitting in the kitchen because it's a bit cooler than my study.
You know, that was one thing about your era when you were teammates. You had to be adaptable. You had to think on the strategy. You had to have a feeling for the car. What's your sort of view on the way that this new evolution of racing is coming around?
Well, I mean, this idea
we don't speak together. Huh?
Yeah, no, we'll give this one to Derek, shall we, Jackie?
Yeah, well, but you know, I never know what he's going to say.
That's why we're going to give it to. That's why we're going to give it to Derek.
It's my brother.
Can I just interrupt before? I don't know how many minutes we've got. Just now, Jackie, I was doing something for a book, a forward for a book. Sorry, I have to bring this up, Alan. And lo and behold, there it is. How did you get into Ferrari? And lo and behold, I suddenly realized that I had a test drive with Ferrari at a place called Crystal Palace way back in July, back in 1968. And Jackie was driving it at Crystal Palace, and I was going to test it on the Monday after the race. And I then came across it. Jackie crashed the bloody thing, and I never got in it to test. And I went, and I thought, that's the end of my career at Ferrari. And now Jack is my greatest friend. But at that time, I'm going, who's this bloke X that goes around crashing the car I'm going to have a test drive in? I bet you remember it, Jackie, but you won't remember that I was due to
No,
drive
I
it
don't
today.
think. I think, Derek, you're getting old. That's the problem. Because at the start, I was hit by somebody else and I could not compete and the car was not repairable. So once again, you're my brother, but you're really getting old.
It's fantastic
Sorry,
that you
Alan.
guys, even though over all these times you're still there and you've still got the stories. Any more of those stories coming out? Maybe, Jackie, you've got a response to Derek?
Now, well, now, Derek, you see, in Destiny, you've got to be the right team. And definitely at Le Mans, you need a partner. Derek has been the most fantastic partner I had at Le Mans and in long distance racing generally. And we had the same thoughts on a number of subjects, and the basic idea was to try to win. And that's what we did. But I like to remember the drivers are important, no doubt. But if you don't have the right car, if you don't have all these people who work in the shade, even if you're talented, you cannot win, definitely.
And Derek, you know, here in the virtual world, we've got a team of engineers. We've got two simulators actually in the studio here. We've got Alpine and IDEC in LMP2, and they've got their engineers working with the drivers. That whole mentality, that teamwork, that bonding, the difference between the drivers and the setup and things is exactly the same as it was in your day, as it is in my day, as it is in their day. This sort of thing I don't think will ever change when you come to Le Mans.
No, it won't. I mean, it is amazing to see these guys racing around there as genuine as you can get. I think it's phenomenal what they've done. I just hope we don't have to watch it for the rest of my life, because I hope we can get back to some proper racing, Alan. But it is still, nonetheless, absolutely brilliant what they're doing, and the way everybody's working at it, as you say, with the engineers doing things. No, it's great to see, and it's just lovely to see Le Mans there, and it appears there's a crowd too in certain places.
Yeah, at the moment we're obviously simulating Le Mans because we would have been there, and we would all have been there, and we'd have been enjoying the start of the race. We're coming up to sort of night time and seeing where things are. Tell me, are you guys going to get into a sim at some point, or is that maybe just one step too far at the moment?
Well, as far as I'm concerned,
you go.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm far away. Yes, I belong from another century, but I think you have to live with your time, definitely. And what is fantastic is the confrontation with the expert, was I heard, with the sim drivers and the drivers as well, because basically the major change between yesterday and today is that most of the drivers, practically all of them, practice on simulators. So there is not such a big gap between the two. but the simulator and e-racing, it's a fantastic opportunity for those who don't have the opportunity to become drivers or to create a new generation of people and to interest a new generation into motor racing. And at the end, yes, we will all be back at Le Mans, maybe in September, because it's the COVID-19, or we'll decide if we go or if we don't know. But this is a fantastic weekend. We really enjoy it. And as Derek says, what we see is just unbelievable, because I see some crowd around the track. Anyhow, it's so perfect that you see people, marshals and everything. Unbelievable. Great game.
Derek, are you going to be joining us at Le Mans in September?
Well, that's the idea. Yeah, I was meant to be. I don't know. I was under the impression I was the Grand Marshal this year, so I probably will be there, Alan. So you better be good.
I'll always be good for you, sir. But gentlemen, all I can say is that Le Mans is about breaking new ground, and I think we've maybe seen new ground being broken today. At the same time, though, it needs people to inspire, and both of you inspired me and my generation, a Tom Christensen, a Dindo Capello, Frank Biela, and all of these guys into wanting to try and follow in your footsteps. But I've got to say, they were very, very fast footsteps. So with 11 victories between you, congratulations, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this virtual race, and very much look forward to seeing you when it comes to the real race in September. Gentlemen,
well done.
Thank you, Alan. Bye-bye,
to the wider
Derek.
Benedicts family, I hope you're safe and well.
Thank you.
What a fantastic chat with some of the legends of our sport and this historic race from so many years, writing different histories, and this particular event no different. We may well get a real world race this year, but this will also go down in the history books in the virtual world. We had some pit stops. The top two have been in the pits, Atzi Kirchhoff, as well as the Veloce Esports 2 car of Poradzic, and we'll have a bit more on them as well. But the pit stop cycle for LMP is going, as well as the GTE. Erhan Yuyovsky in the Corvette Romain Grosjean team still out on track. Tommy Uskerd has just done his stop, so now is 1:17 back from Yuyovsky, and actually it's a Corvette 1, 2, 3 with Ron Heinrich in second place and Terzic in third for Corvette Racing. So the sim drivers are now in the cars. We've got less and less of the real world drivers, but the real world drivers, or the less experienced drivers, do still have to do at least 4 hours of the race. Maximum driver time 7 hours, minimum driver time 4 hours. So of course your faster sim drivers will likely do the maximum, and the less experienced drivers at the minimum. But plenty still to shake out. Just a couple of hours into this race. As I say, our leading drivers are all going to change now as we go through this pit cycle. But interesting also to see our leading two already making stops. They're some of the first cars to get into the pits in this cycle, therefore perhaps using a bit more fuel than the guys behind. 2C's Motorsport yet to stop. Toyota Gazoo Racing, both the Argentina car and the other car, Pachito Lopez, which is now behind that Argentina car, yet to stop. Then we've got the Rebellion Williams Esports duo of Gazna and Louis Delatraz, also due a stop as well. Louis Delatraz racing from Geneva, having also led the Isaro Esports Championship. Well, that was enjoyable, Alan. Always fantastic to share stories with gentlemen of Le Mans, and no different to have three legends all together exchanging stories about something brand new.
Yeah, it is. It's certainly a new era, there's no question about it. And Jackie Ickx was very correct that everybody has their era, but it's something that's just the evolution. And we've got the evolution of us as humans and how we adapt to technology. We've got the evolution of technology, and this has just accelerated it forward like you wouldn't believe. And it's very interesting for me looking at the messages coming in to my phone of some of my era of engineers and team bosses and things that are just saying this is actually really cool and really good and enjoying it for what it is in terms of entertainment, but also the sporting
information. The pit lane drive-through penalty on car 3737 for losing control of the car at pit entry and rejoining in a dangerous manner, blocking car 23. Drive-through penalty on car number 3737 for a dangerous maneuver rejoining the track.
I'm not sure whether he was actually in control when he rejoined the track, Alan.
No, he wasn't. You know, the thing is, when you come into the pit lane, you actually brake at the same point as you would if you were staying on the circuit. You just happen to be in the pit lane. But if the circuit is actually much cleaner, so if you do make a mistake, then you get onto the dusty part and there's gravel and rubbish out there, and you can quite easily lose it, get over the curbs, and that's exactly what happens. And so I agree with you, he wasn't in control. The issue was he wasn't in control when he actually was in the pit lane before. So he's received a drive-through penalty, which is quite a tough one because he's also had a little bit of contact there as well with 23. So that was Buncombe and Farbra that were the two cars involved in it.
And into the pits now, the Toyota Argentina car, as well as the works car of Kobayashi. You can see it's just sitting there. He doesn't have a lot of time before he'll be going back out onto circuit, selecting to change tyres, refuel the car, but I don't think there'll be a driver change. This is the first of the stints for Kobayashi, and quite a quiet circuit as we've got almost half a dozen cars in pit lane right now from the LMP category. The GT category did get their Corvettes in. The Corvettes pitted quite a bit later than the Porsches. And now Usgaard has a 2.7-second lead over Yuyovsky. Porsche ahead of Corvette Racing. The second of the Corvettes in fourth behind Matt Backham at some 10 seconds back. And then the first of our Aston Martins now in fifth position.
Just seeing Kobayashi sitting in there in the pits, just ready to go out. Kazuki Nakajima, his teammate, is actually sitting behind there in support as well. And so it's a full attack there by Toyota Gazoo Racing.
And as you said, it's great to see some people at home in their bedrooms, other people at showrooms. It looks like Toyota have organised something over in Japan, in Tokyo. It looks a bit like a TV studio, so Kobayashi with a bit extra pressure. And then Ferrari, all of Ferrari, apart from a couple of drivers, sharing the same room in the museum in Maranello. Again, I think a bit of an advantage to have everyone together. We also saw in Monaco 3 drivers out of the 4 of the Strong Together team are sharing the same area too.
But then the one possible downside is if you have a technical problem with one of your rigs, and that is the rig you're all sharing, you've got a major technical problem. If you have got one in another part of the world, you can maybe switch over. But talking about Maranello, they had spare rigs, if I remember the interview yesterday.
Yeah, power or connection issues in that building. Everyone out.
Which is quite possible in Italy. Like, the power and internet does drop down quite a lot, but hopefully Maranello's got a decent internet connection. Ferrari at the moment on the back foot, but perhaps the strategy will work for them. Fastest lap of the race from the GT category for Usgaard, Tommy Usgaard, in his second stint, this time not sitting in the slipstream of Yuyovsky, and he's just done a 3:48.930.
Yeah, 7/10 of a second quicker than anybody else's fastest lap as well. Oof. You know, that's a lap time to throw down. That's what I can do. Come and chase me, guys.
It is seemingly Porsche versus Corvette at the head of the field in GT, although the Aston Martin is trying to get involved. Lise Sorensen from Denmark racing in the studio there.
Information to the pit lane, car 54, drive-through penalty for unsafe release. Car 54, drive-through penalty for unsafe release after the pit stop.
Now that's an interesting one, although there are cones in the way which always get a bit of abuse. Oh, we did squeeze the LMP2 into the wall. I was about to say, it's not unsafe if there are no people in the pit lane to run over, but if you squeeze the car into the wall, it's a bit naughty.
Yeah, you can't really come out side by side with someone like that. Giancarlo Fisichella, with the experience he has at Le Mans, he'll know that, and as you said, couldn't get more to the right perhaps, and had nowhere else to go, or perhaps thought that he'd left more room on the left there, and the LMP2 car ended up making a little bit of contact. And not only is that going to slow that LMP2 car down, but possibly have some damage just as they're going out to start their stint.
I think the point is that the car in the fast lane has priority. It is in the fast lane, and so therefore the LMP2 had the priority. I'm not so sure whether Giancarlo Fisichella would actually see, because if you think of the vision out of the Ferrari, maybe the mirror, he's coming at an angle, so therefore he's not necessarily seeing what could be in the fast lane. That's where his team need to be on the ball.